Fused Zamasu arrives into Fusion World as one of the hardest to lethal decks in the game. Welcome to Archetype 101. I'm Espira and we're going to be breaking down Blue Zamasu. We'll be going over what the deck aims to do, an example deck list to get you started, and some sample gameplay to see it play out. Without further ado, let's get started. Zamasu is a blue leader released in Blazing Aura. On his front side, he draws and awakens at 3 life. This 3 life condition is warranted by his awakened side being a tank type lead, similar to Green Broly. This 25k beat stick loses the ability to draw, but has the ability to gain life at the cost of an energy and a card from hand. The loss of hand advantage doesn't go unmissed, however, and so utilize a 4-cost Fused Zamasu that not only presents a good body that's hard to remove, but has a 1 attack that will draw you a card every turn. Stabilize the board with the most powerful board wipe in the game, Zeno. Careful though, as he will take your board with it. Strike down on your opponent's battle cards with absolute lightning, bottom decking any card for a cost of 3. With all that board control, seal the deal with the Vegito Secret Rare that can not only bounce cards back to your opponent's hand, but also attack twice per turn. We'll be going over the 101 deck list to give you an idea of what this deck does in a vacuum. However, if you're looking to level up beyond the base strategy, I post competitive variants alongside write-ups breaking down my thoughts about the deck's strengths, weaknesses, and position in the meta over on my Patreon, alongside some additional perks. I'd love to have you join me in discovering the meta and being ahead of the curve. It is actually really difficult to kind of land on a Zamasu list that feels good. The misdraw from his backside is really tough, even though you get a lot of infinite recursion tools in blue to constantly keep the gas going, but then you're always in a position to have to pay energy, so you're off curve. It feels really awkward and thus making it really tough to justify where Zamasu lands. He's really hard to kill, don't get me wrong, just off the back of just being so chunky and being in blue, meaning that you always have resources, but how you go about closing out the game can be a little bit difficult. And so we really have to look at the tools that give us multiple turns worth of value to compensate for the fact that we're not always going to be able to play on curve. I will say though, this is probably my most speculative list based on trying to give you guys an idea of what Bandai would like us to do with the archetype, but also trying to fit in a strategy that can potentially win, especially given that we're going to be leaning more into control, and control just needs to know what it's controlling for. And that's really hard to do at the beginning of the meta when we don't fully understand exactly how people are playing or what people are taking a tournament, so on and so forth. So with that, I would take this more as a beginning of the deck building process for the deck. And I look forward to working on it and evolving as we experiment and understand what we're going to have to be controlling for. Nevertheless, though, we have some great control tools that deal with a little bit of everything. So we're going to love seeing the suite from blue that's able to defend ourselves. We've got the 1-drop Goten, which is also an Earthling, which, surprise, surprise, we're running peel off. So the fact that we have a searchable 10k that's not just peel off from our drop area is very much welcome, and is able to bounce a 2-cost to the hand, putting some tempo on our side. Of course, we're running Vegito because he just synergizes so well with the rest of the deck. Permanent, if we have 7 or fewer cards in hand, it reduces the cost of battle cards across the board from 1, which is very nice. And then he himself will bottom deck a 2-drop when he comes down if you have the prerequisite cards in hand, which is very much welcome, especially since it turns our Sinister Sickle to be able to bottom deck 5 drops, which is pretty meaningful. And then, of course, Absolute Lightning, just because the ability to say, you know what, this card is a little bit too detrimental right now, let's bottom deck it, is some nice flexibility. I had already talked about Sickle, but Sickle is so much better this set than it was in set 1, just because there are so many strategies that are looking to play 2-3 battle cards per turn, if not more. So blue very much welcomes the ability to try and stabilize board over and over and over again. One of the most important things that Zamasu needs to do, however, outside of just surviving, is actually being able to close out the game naturally. And with that, we're using a bunch of cards that accrue value turn over turn over turn to compensate for the fact that we're not always going to be able to play energy. In that, we've started off with Zamasu, a hard to remove body that also allows us to draw a card every single turn. Very much welcome, because again, we're just going to need that additional gas since we're not drawing with our leader. Goku Black is such a fantastic tool in this deck because it allows us to continuously play 4 drops over and over and over again, which means we're not having to commit our energy to it while we're potentially going to set up and gaining some life. Now, the Zamasu Fuse, I'm not completely sold on. I don't necessarily think this is a phenomenal tool for the deck, but I think it's a really cute card, and hey, Bandai wants us to play with it, so I've kind of hit a middle ground that we're going to include the 6-drop. Spoiler alert, there's no 5-drop in here, which is like a 30k that when KOs plays this, which is really neat, but you just can never really rely on your opponent KOing your cards, especially a big beefy one like that. So in general, we include it for the fun and the spice, but this is really where this deck varies. And I would say if you don't want to include the 6-drop, you're probably better off for it. I'm just including it as a great, hey, this is kind of how we can play the strategy. So we've got our board control. We've got our top end that allows us to accrue value. Naturally, we're in blue though, and that means infinite value is the name of the game. And this is where we get some of our blue engine pieces. Running some trunks because with the combination of Gotenks just means we can feed ourselves much more combo power. I will say it's a little bit of a bummer that trunks is only the 5k, but we don't need self-awakeners in the deck. So there might be room there to be able to flex and swap in and out our options. But for now, only the Goten is a 10k combo with the trunks being a 5k. Then we got Peel Off, allows to loop itself, allows us to loop the Goten also, which is welcome. And then finally, Galagun. Oftentimes we're going to be comboing many turns out of our opponent. So the fact that we can do it for a free card essentially is really, really solid. Naturally, things go wrong sometimes as you're trying to be the control deck, and thus having an oh shit button is very much welcome. And we have that in the form of Vegito, which is very nice because having the secret rare that is also comboable is not something that we've had in the game before. So it makes it much more main deckable. So we're able to bounce something, we're able to attack 2 times for 30k. So it's really nice in that it can effectively remove 3 bodies off the board if lined up properly, as opposed to just having to beat face in your opponent. And then we've got Zeno as the ultimate oh no, which allows us to board wipe and is really neat because if you're playing against green, tough matchup for sure, but specific to Cell, it also gets rid of field cards, which is currently the only way to get rid of field cards. And having a way to do that is really neat. And just having a, we're going to clear everything and start all over again is definitely a tool that blue very much welcomes. To round out the deck, we've got a pair of Zamasus that we'll be including as well. So we've got the 1-drop, that bottom deck's a 1-drop, and it's even more important this set given how strong and important the 1-drops are in this set. So we welcome that extra versatility, especially in the form of a 10k combo. And then we run a pair of 2-drop Zamasus. Permanent can't be removed from the barrier by your opponent's skills. So just a sticky body that our opponent might have to focus and attack into, which means they're attacking into us less, and does have the benefit that when attacking, we have to discard a card and draw a card. A little bit of cycle to clean up our hand as we get into our mid and late game. In terms of ratios, it's a lot of very confident choices, but a lot of experimental choices, a lot of 2-ofs. I'm running 2 of the 6-drop Fused Zamasu just as a kind of techie thing, but realistically, if you want to sub that into running 4 Zenos, I think that makes perfect sense as well. Otherwise, just some ratios to kind of make our Gotens, Trunks, and Gotenks work well. And then on the extra side, leaning in on our most important extra cards being Galagun and Sinister Sickle out of 4 of each. Pretty important, especially in the top coup matchup, being able to see multiple Sinister Sickles is what actually allows you to get to the late game and is pretty relevant. Here, Goku Black is a great slot in at 3, being able to play our Fused Zamasus, our Gotenks, draw additional cards that way, and then keep on producing turn over turn value. But again, the build is experimental. It's really hard to say which way you're supposed to go with blue control in general, no matter what leader you use. And then even more so for Zamasu when you consider that he doesn't draw on his backside. So you need to be a little bit more peculiar with the choices that you make. With that in mind though, let's check out some gameplay so we can at least get some form of an idea of how we're going to be lining up our plays. A lot of opening hands for Zamasu are going to be a little bit clunky, or at least they read that way initially, just because we're running so much removal, extra cards, things of the sort. But this is perfectly fine. These are the kinds of hands that we're looking for in terms of getting that long-term defense. We've got our 1-drop Zamasu to be able to prevent our opponent's 1-drop. And furthermore, we have more defensive tools and things like Galagun and stuff like that if we don't want to take damage for essentially free, especially considering that being at around 7 hand size is how we get things like Fused Zamasu and the 2-drop Zamasu and other cards like that to really work their maximum effort for us. I do think we want to see Vegito, but we have a couple of turns to be able to dig into him. So as the first turn player, I would say that the Vegito is probably not the thing we need the most, but it has combo power, which is the most relevant. Maybe we actually just charge an absolute lightning and pass turn to our opponent. Opponent likely hit us for 1, so we're going to go ahead and take the life there, and now we have a 2-drop play. Although we did always have the option of utilizing Galagun if we wanted to defend ourselves here. There's a couple of choices depending on what you're playing against, but opponent's turn 1, they attack for us once. Good enough for us. Then we draw for turn. That's our super combo. So we'll just shove that to the side here. And, now we have to consider, did our opponent play a 1-drop? Did they not play a 1-drop? What are they going to do, right? So if we want to potentially dig and find ourselves a Sickle to do it on turn 3 or a Vegito, here I would probably say if you're playing against top coup, let's say you're going to want to get rid of their 1-drop. So odds are we won't really have enough opportunity to play the 2-drop Zamasu. So instead here, what I'm going to consider is just swing, draw a card, peel off. It's good for later. And then after that, we'll just play 1 energy, bottom deck the opponent's 1-drop, get it off the board. And now we still have 1 up for Galagun. Pass it over to our opponent. They're going to attack into us twice. Odds are they, if they're red, utilizing a hit. Hit will naturally get rid of the Zamasu. And now we have to defend ourselves against the attack here. I think it's a pretty fine position to go ahead and use Galagun, gain ourselves a card, and then live to see another day. Opponent will attack into us a second time. Odds are with their leader. This time probably being a 15k. and I feel comfortable. I want to play this. I don't know that we're gonna have to use this right away, and so I think for now we're fine with comboing that away. Stayed at 7, great. And surviving is the name of the game until we can get into the late game, where at that point hopefully the hand advantage won't be a big deal because we'll have things set up on board to be able to mitigate what our opponent is doing. So we'll go ahead and draw, restand everything up, and now the considerations for our charge. I would love to maybe see a sickle here, but maybe not. I think Vegeta would be the biggest thing that we'd really want to see. So with that, I think we can actually just charge this Zamasu here because there's a good chance we'll be making this play the turn afterwards. So we'll be going and swing, draw. Hope we can find a 3-drop. We cannot find a 3-drop, unfortunately. But our opponent played a 2-drop. So you know what? Why don't we just play the 1-drop? We play go 10. We bounce that back to their hand, and now their board is minimized. This goes away. It's a peel off target. We also get to Galagun on our opponent's next turn. So pass it over to our opponent. Odds are this dies because there's a good chance that's just what cards are going to do. But we have another Galagun to be able to draw ourselves out of that attack. And then we're a bit of a suspect position. We don't have a lot of cards in hand. And I do want to make sure that we're able to actually defend bigger hits. So odds are if our opponent attacked into us, we're probably just going to take it this time. But we're at 6 going into our turn 4. That is pretty good. It's very manageable from here. We'll go ahead and draw for turn. And now the question lies. I don't think we're doing this anytime soon, to be totally honest. But hey, we're in a great position to do this. So I'm actually going to pay the 4 and play the Fused Zamasu. Attack, and we're only at 5 cards in hand here. We're going to draw. Then we swing, draw. And the beauty about this card is that if you're against red, it's a little bit suspect. But if it KOs, it does come back. And then they need to get rid of it again, which puts some pretty good effort on their end. And we don't mind defending this because we need to stay at 7 or less in hand anyways. It's just another beat stick for us to help control, mitigate the board. You do want to defend early. You don't mind that, especially since your late game is what's going to carry you. So here we're in a position where, I don't know, I'm assuming at this point our opponent's ignoring this. Their only real way, like let's say if they're top coup to really get into this, is to play Gohan and then find some other neg, which is not the easiest to do on their turn 4. But here they could play Kefla. It's not out of the question that they might just be awakened at this point. So we have to get ready for 3 swings, even if we cleared out the board. So with that, I'm pretty into defending most of it, right? So odds are we're going to get rid of something like a Go 10, potentially maybe have to use a super combo. And maybe, I mean, I do kind of want to keep the Fused Zamasu because I think having chain back to back of those is going to be pretty important. But now we have to think about what we want to do board clear wise and how we're going to deal with that. So here there's a world in which, you know, we defended 2 hits. I'm not feeling great about getting rid of anything else in the hand, so we might just take the damage. From there, we'll unsuspend anything, draw for turn, and now I think the charge is going to be... I want to keep the Trunks around so that it makes our Gotenks more live, especially if we're going to be going into our Awakened turn soon. But hey, you know what, charge it, we're going to find more pieces to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and swing to be able to get our 7th card. Get another 4-drop. Honestly, if we keep chaining 4-drops, that's pretty good because now we can chain a 4-drop. We have open for Galagun. That feels pretty hot. So if we pay 4, we could be looking for other options, but I think for now, just chaining multiple Zamasus is good. We haven't found our sickles or anything like that, but hey, we got Galagun. We're drawing more cards. That feels pretty good to me. Draw there, swing with our leader, draw there. And now we've got our turn 6, which is really sick because obviously we have the Gotenks here. We could just play another Fused Zamasu. And now we're in a position where if our opponent ignores the board, we might actually be deadly into them and keep on pressuring them. But this is going to be the hardest turn to defend. We pass it over to our opponent. Odds are we can spend the 1 energy to Galagun, defend ourselves out of an attack, and then draw. And then maybe use a 10k combo, and then use a 10k combo again. And even with that, odds are we might be taking a couple of hits, but we've got a super combo to defend ourselves out of that one. So we've got a lot of juice to be able to make it to the late game. But it's very precarious, right? Odds are they're aggressing us in a way that even with all that combo, they're on their turn 5, which means potentially if they're top coup, they could play a Kefla for 1, play a body, and then use the 4 energy to play another Kefla, play more bodies. So even with that defense, odds are maybe we take the 2 damage, which our opponent really wants to get us to 3. So we'll go ahead and take the 2 life just to kind of represent what it would be like to be awakened. Then we'll go ahead and do it like this. And now, I mean, Galagun's great, but we're in a position where we don't actually have a means of utilizing it if we go into our Goku Black this turn, and I really want to go into Goku Black this turn to potentially play another Fused Zamasu or play a Gotenks or something of the sort. So just because, you know, we're at 3 life now, it's a bit of a precarious situation, we'll go ahead and set this down. And now we're in a position where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, pretty neat spot, honestly, especially since we get to draw a ton of cards. And with Goku Black, we're able to add something back to hand, of which I think our only options at the moment are going to be Gotenks, Goten, which is fine. I don't mind that. So just because of the hand size considerations, we're just going to line up our plays in a specific way to try to maximize as much as we can. So we're going to pay the 3 here and then play the Goku Black, get the Goten back in hand. And then we are going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we'll get a swing here, draw. Blue Lightning's not great, not something I love to see, but maybe now we're in a position where, let's say we can combo this, that goes away, then we'll swing with this one, draw. Got another 4-drop Zamasu, that's pretty hot, I do think. And then we can swing with Goku Black, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, play another Fused Zamasu. And honestly, if you're in a position where you're just playing a bunch of Fused Zamasus back to back to back, that feels pretty good. So then we can swing with the Fused Zamasu afterwards, be able to draw a card, and then swing with our leader, draw from there as well. And hey, you guys do exist. And then from our opponent's point of view, we're going to be then awakening odds are on defense just to protect ourselves. And this is where the big defense comes in, right? Like we're going to have to dump so many cards into defending ourselves. Odds are that might not be enough, but we have the benefit of, at the very least, being a 25k lead, which makes it harder for our opponent to be able to punch into us if we do have to combo away everything. But let's say they're able to deal a damage on us. Well, we don't particularly mind too much because we have a ton of draw engines on the board to be able to just go even further. So we can't draw with our lead, but we are in a position where we can probably want to charge the Absolute Lightning here. But we can pay 1 energy, gain a life. We have to discard a card as well. So we'll go ahead and discard this Vegito. And if you're established enough, this is where I was saying that endgame is really important for Zamasu. We're not drawing with our leader, but we've established boards that let us draw cards, be able to play cards, and thus we have an engine that perpetuates a lot of advantage that leaders usually do while still keeping our energy open to do something like paying 3 and going into the Sinister Sickle. So the fact that those are all options to us are really something that we welcome. So we'll start by attacking with our Fused Zamasu, draw cards, Fused Zamasu, draw cards, Fused Zamasu, draw cards. And I understand that this is very much not typical. Odds are your opponent's not going to leave your boards being like this, but we'll take advantage of these things looking the way that they do just for now. And then I say we could swing with Goku Black, potentially play a Vegito, which will bottom deck something. But what's really cool about this play now that we have Vegito is that we can actually pay 3 and use Sinister Sickle, and if they played any 5-drops, we can get rid of those on the board. Then we can do something like swing with Vegito, combo the Trunks, make that a 30k attack, which is our nice magic numbers, pay the 4 from there, and we're able to play Gotenks, get a Trunks, as well as a Goten out of our discard pile, add those back to our hand, and then who knows, maybe we're going for game, maybe we're not going for game, but we can swing, we have a super combo, this much left in hand. And now the onus is up to our opponent, right, to deal with our board. I will say, I think oftentimes you'll be board controlled a little bit, but blue has been really good in set 2 in establishing boards that are hard for your opponent to deal with. We never got the Vegito, but if we did get the Vegito, first off, it's a 25k, so it's not the easiest thing for our opponent to deal with on turn 3, especially considering that we bounced the 2-drop back to their hand, so they're just going to have to commit more to the board to defend it. And then from there, you're just constantly establishing boards, right? Like Vegito, hard to kill, at least on turn 3. And then if you drop a Fused Zamasu, your opponent's forced to have to kill it twice unless they neg it, which is not the easiest thing to do on turn 4 if they're not awakened and can't use things like awakening to a Super Saiyan. So because of that, you're just in a position where, hopefully, in an optimal world, you're establishing these engine-style boards that will do a lot of the work for you while you play slightly off curve once your leader's awakened. But you do want to do the green playstyle of defending as early as possible. I think blue is really hard to figure out, and especially when we're doing like demo gameplay, kind of like the way I'm doing here, it's kind of hard to tell really how games will play out based on how your opponent's attacking into you. And I am showcasing the best case scenarios, but I do want to caveat that it is really difficult to understand exactly where blue's position is going to be in the meta when you're playing such a control heavy variant in the way that Zamasu does. I think blue has a lot of things to look forward to in set 2, and if you are a blue player in set 1, I think you have a lot to be excited about. And with that, I'm really looking forward to seeing the evolution blue is going to make over the first 2 to 3 weeks, because I think it's going to be a fantastic time to evolve, shape up your game plan, and maybe take an advantage of where the meta currently lies. Catch you guys on the next one.